All right. Hi. Welcome to our next week 4 discussion or lecture, I guess. A couple things. There's a lot of slides going on in this presentation, so I'm going to try to gallop along as quickly as I can, but trying to cover 4 chapters of material in my fixed amount of time, which is max 15 minutes. It will be difficult, so I will try to move very quickly. It's reinforcement of what's in the book, so if you have questions, read up on those things. The discussion board for this week will only focus on one area of this lecture, and so if there are other things that you hear that you want to discuss further, please bring those up in the voice thread so that we can all be a part of that discussion and move ourselves forward. But there's one particular topic that I want to really focus in the discussion. So with that said, let's start moving in through chapter 6, 7, 8, and then also chapter 13 in preparation for you doing your observations. So chapter 6. Glickman, Gordon, and Ross Gordon start to discuss this idea of a supervisory behavior continuum, and they look at categories of behavior. So there's these kinds of behaviors that supervisors engage in that they use really then as their structure to describe the various types of supervisory behaviors. And this behavior continuum is where it's really teacher-centered. That's the capital T on the left, and supervisors, less supervisor-centered. That's why you have a lowercase s, all the way to where the teacher is not very focused and very much focused on the supervisor. So these fall from the teacher-centered to the supervisor-centered, non-directive, collaborative, directive informational, and directive control. And this week we're going to look at those last two, starting with directive control, the most supervisory heavy behavior, followed then by directive informational, a little bit more on towards the middle, and has a little bit more teacher information in there. So they talk about the various kinds of approach and what we want from the outcome of when we have conferences with teachers, when we meet and discuss those. So those non-directive, the teacher's developing their own plan. Right? And we're just there as facilitator, really as resource support. All the way down again to directive control, where the supervisor is the one that's assigning the plan. These are the things that need to happen in order for you to be successful. And then the middle two are kind of this in-between space. A little bit more supervisor heavy and the directive informational, a little more teacher supervisor on equal with the collaborative approach. So this was another one of those kinds of visuals that was brought up in the chapter. So this is another way of looking and thinking about the way in which teacher and supervisor can interact with each other. And all of this, is this idea. A lot of this is about this idea of creating this cognitive dissonance, which is this this idea in which the way in which learning really is occurring, right? That we have some mental model. There's some input that causes some kind of turmoil. The resolve of this is a perceptual or behavioral change, right? So we create this dissonance. The resolution is behavioral, this perceptual or behavioral change. So this kind of learning process, all right? So sometimes it's important for the supervisor to also engage in a self-assessment. And these are some of the possible results of those self-assessments as we look through that. We take input, maybe we think we're acting in one particular way, but our teachers are telling us otherwise. And so we can go into this kind of self-reflection, galloping along. Chapter 7. So this is the directive control behaviors. These are the most specific pieces here, right? The most directive, obviously by the name, but supervisory heavy. When we engage in the behavior of presenting, where the supervisor's presenting, then we might ask for a clarification if the teacher's input in terms of, do you see this also as a problem? Then we listen as the teacher gives their point of view. We listen carefully on that, followed then by us, the supervisor, determining the best solution for this. Then continuing on, we then give direction, right? We tell the teacher the expectations. Um, Clarify, we ask for the teacher input. Do you understand those expectations? How can we help with those? Then detail and modify the expectations so we get really specific. And then we repeat, follow up. And so one of the things that's important here is to understand that there's been a history of over-reliance on control. So something you might want to pause here, because I'm going to keep moving pretty quickly. Our controlling behavior is sometimes used as a first rather than a last resort with your administrators. When they're working in that supervisory role, do you see them jump to be directive and be controlling? And directive, this is very controlling model, right? So there's some issues. You got to be forthright. You got to use your power and authority. And here you take on the issue of having to also be oversight, and so you've got time issues, right? But there are times when it's very appropriate. Teacher or a group of teachers are working at a really low developmental levels. All the way through here to the teacher isn't committed to resolving the issues, and so you have to be committed, and you're going to be very directive in that. All right, so directive informational, the next layer, right? And we're doing pretty well on time, but I want to give time, make sure we have plenty of time, so I'm going to keep galloping along. So again, here we go through these behaviors. You're presenting, you're identifying the goal, right? Then you're asking the teacher for their input, and you again are listening and trying to go through this process. Now you're trying to determine, and then you provide alternatives. So instead of providing, remember, directive control, it was here's what's going to happen at that directing layer. Here you're providing alternatives to the teacher to consider, right? So we continue on, and now they're giving input onto those alternatives. You then are going to frame a final choice. So again, here's the way I see this happening. You ask the teacher for a choice. Are they willing to do this, or would they give more input? Again, you detail the actions that need to be taken, and then you reinforce. Oh, I didn't. So when we compare directive control and directive informational, here are some things that are language choices, right? It's essential that one of my expectations is that you need to, you must, I will, very clear, right? You will be required. These are very directive. The directive informational is I suggest, so, we could do this or this. One alternative is you could. You see the softening of the language there. And that's an important note. There is a softening of the language, without a doubt. So there are issues here. You have to have credibility in this process. And then you have to be ready to do if the teacher refuses to make a choice, right? Are you going to maintain this directive informational? Are you going to cause them to make a choice? Or are you going to fall out of this and into directive control, in which you then choose and tell them? Right? So when to use this one? When a teacher or group is functioning at a fairly low level, right? They're not totally rock bottom, but they're still at a pretty low level and need a fair amount of guidance from you as the supervisor. They don't possess the knowledge that you do. They're confused or they're inexperienced. Again, maybe with younger teachers, we're providing a little bit more direction as they are becoming experienced, becoming more veteran teacher. All right. Willing to take responsibility for what the teacher or the group chooses to try. I'm willing to give up that control and let them make a choice. If I'm not willing to do that, I shouldn't be in this mode. I should be in directive control because I should be dictating what's happening, right? When a teacher, when they believe I have credibility, right, and time again is short, and so we want clear, concrete actions, and we need to take those. So critical reflection on directive control. Here are some points, some questions that we may be asking of ourselves in terms of critical reflection. Will it work with this teacher group? Would another approach work better? So there's kind of a really fast gallop through an introduction and the first two kinds of behavioral controls, and obviously coming up in the coming week or so, we'll be looking at the other two, collaborative and non-directive. But we also need to talk about observation skills, observing skills, because you are going to be engaged in your first observation. So observation as a process is a two-part process. First, we describe what's been seen, and then we interpret what that means. And again, describe what took place in this very non-judgmental kind of place, and then maybe you can jointly interpret the data, right? So formative observation instruments are not summative evaluation instruments, and this is an important piece, and this is the way the EDAS model is designed, in which the observation instrument is not the evaluation. The observation instrument is a data collection to help shape this summative evaluation process. So this observation can take a couple of different forms. It can be quantitative, in which we're taking category frequency instruments. So we're talking about placement in the room, and we are on a time schedule making X's on where the person is in the room. That's really actually visual diagramming, right? Categorical frequency instruments would be things like teacher asks question, teacher provides information, students respond to questions, student raise hands, all these types of things, and you're tick marking the frequency in which those things occur, right? Qualitative observations. Again, here's a host of these, and they're discussed within the chapter. You can look at it a little bit further. Quite honestly, I use much more of these kinds of things than I would do kind of a combination of kind of selected verbatim and detached open narrative. Would really be the kinds that I operate in. There's tailored systems that, a formal system doesn't exist. I'm down to 2 minutes, so I just want to be clear that I'm going to keep moving fast. There's an example of one. There's others. So observations are affected by our own personal experiences, interpretation of what data means is a construction, right? So think about this in terms of it's not cut and dry what our interpretation is. We construct that based off of who we are, our own experiences, our own levels of experience, and our skills around recording the data. All right, I made it. So coming up, you do have your first observation is due. So please, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. The discussion board, voice thread seems to be going well. Folks seem to be doing a good job on that. And best of luck, and we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.